So this is Nick Rath's interview. I'm interviewing Sam Rath. So where did you grow up when you as a child?
I grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire.
And what was your life like there, like in high school? Like, did you play any sports? Explain.
I grew up with a single parent family, my dad, and I did play sports. I played high school football. I tried baseball for a small semester for half a year. Only made the JV team. But I was just your typical, I'd say, high school senior, high school student.
What do you do currently for a living?
I currently help veterans from all the services, all the branches. I help them with finding a second career, a career after the military. I go out and I'm like a career coach. Since I've done lots of things, I can give them advice as a veteran myself. And I travel all over New England and sometimes down into North Carolina, South Carolina.
Have any of your family members prior to you served in a war or served in the military?
My sister never served. She had to she never went to college. She went straight to work because of our family situation. But my dad did serve in World War II. He was a medic, and I guess that's one of the reasons why. But he retired when I was 14, and so we struggled a little bit.
And what made you decide to first join the Marines?
Well, it's a very long story, but when I was growing up in the high school, in the high schools, we didn't have military recruiters coming into the schools and telling us about the military. The only thing I knew about the military was watching war movies with my dad, and I knew that he had joined. And his father, before him, was in World War I, and so that's all I knew about the military. I wanted to go to college, but being a single parent, raising two kids, we couldn't afford college. My sister was already working, so after my peers, all my classmates, come the fall, they were all going off into college, and I was working my butt off. One day I saw a Air Force recruiter, and I figured that, you know what, instead of working my butt off, maybe I can go join the military, join the Air Force, and have them help me pay for my schooling. And how I joined the Marine Corps is another long story, but that's why I looked at the military services.
So how, in short, how did that transition go from wanting to join the Air Force to ending up going to the Marines?
I dropped off my girlfriend at work, and I didn't want to tell anybody I joined the military because I didn't want anybody telling me it's a bad thing, you shouldn't do this. I wanted to do it on my own. So I walked into the military recruiting offices, and the Air Force recruiter light was on. And the old frosted glass wooden door in the federal building. I knocked, no answer, the lights were on, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, okay. So I turned around, and directly behind me was another open door. It was an open door, and I didn't look at the signs, I didn't look at anything. So I stepped in, kind of stepped into the office, and there was a woman. And now I know she was in the Marine Corps uniform, but she was in some sort of uniform at the time, I didn't know. And I said, excuse me. She turns around, she goes, yes. And I'm wearing my football varsity jacket. And it was September, October time frame, started to cool off. And I said, excuse me, but is the Air Force in? She gave me this look like, you're in high school and you can't read. I'm like, what? She goes, she looked at the door that I was standing next to, and it said, U.S. Marines. So, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. And she goes, what do you want? And I said, well, I was looking to see what they had to offer. And she was sharp and abrupt and said, you aren't very smart. This is not the unemployment office. You don't get jobs here. I get scared. She's in uniform. I just recently graduated from high school, and I said, excuse me, and I started walking down the hall, and she yells at me to stop. And she wanted to know if I had an appointment. And I said, no, I don't. And she goes, what do you want to do? What are you looking to do? I said, I want to work in airplanes. Manchester had a small airplane field, and I always heard them, and every time one flew by, I'd like to one day I'd like to either fly in them or fix them or whatever. But I said I want to work in airplanes, and then she told me, she goes, did you know that the Marine Corps is the 8th largest air force in the world? I'm like, no. And she goes, I see that you're in a varsity football team. I'm like, yes. And why didn't you play in the JV? I'm like, because I'm better than the JV. Okay, so why do you want to join the Air Force? So that's like her way of saying that, the Marine Corps is better than the Air Force. And within 30 days, I was signed up, ready to rock and roll, ready to go join the service. So that's how I joined the Marine Corps, because I didn't know anything about the Marines. After she sat me down, I watched all the videos about all the airplanes, where they have helicopters and jets and tanks and you name it, they had it. So I was like, okay, sign me up.
How long after you joined the Marine Corps were you deployed to Saudi Arabia to go fight there?
Saudi Arabia was a surprise to everybody. The Marines, they train for every climate, whether it's the winter, whether it's in the water, whether it's in jungle, wherever it's at. And so we had just finished the Vietnam era, and fighting in jungles and training and all that. All of a sudden, Saudi Arabia, what is that? And we had, our units had trained in the desert. We trained in the mountains. We trained for everything, but we didn't get to go to Saudi until August of '90, when everything, this dictator's taking over a country, and it's like, you know what, we're gonna go. So I'm like, alrighty then. So we went.
So what exactly were your feelings as you were being deployed there? Like, were you scared? Were you excited? Explain.
Everybody's feelings. You're trained to do a mission, and you train hard, and you train so that nothing does happen, and you hope that nothing happens. So everybody's like, okay, we're going to go over there, we're going to do what we've been trained to do, we're going to support the infantry, we're going to carry stuff, and that's our mission. That's all we're going to do. And if we need to go in, we're trained to take care of anything that comes our way. So we were just hoping that we were all trained and we were prepared. So everybody was the same boat. You never want anything to happen, so you try not to think about those things, and you just hope that everything back home is taken care of, and just pray for the best.
What do you think it was going to be like in Saudi Arabia before you got there, like while you were still in America?
We knew it was hot, so we trained in the Mojave Desert. It was 130 degrees in the shade, and we knew the winds. We knew it gets cold at night, it gets hot during the day. At 6 o'clock in the morning, it can be like 45, 50 degrees, and at 7:30 in the morning, an hour and a half later, it's already in the 90s. So we were trained for that, but the only things we weren't trained for was the amount of sand. Sand gets everywhere, and it affected our equipment. It affected us. I used to have to sleep with a bandana on my face because you would breathe it, and your lungs, your nose, your mouth would covered with sand. It was nasty. But that's the only thing. Some of the things we didn't expect, but we were trained pretty well to cope with the heat. Not as much of the sand, but
like you said earlier, it was a surprise that you were gonna have to go to Saudi Arabia in this conflict. What did you know about exactly what was happening, like with Saddam Hussein in Kuwait, before you were actually informed about going and deployed there?
Well, being the I don't know, being the enforcers of the policies, we were given directions and orders, and what the president all the way down, what they want us to do, sometimes isn't clear, because every unit has different things they've got to do. So our mission was to support the infantry, the artillery, the jeeps, all those things, and then to keep them supplied with ammunition, with food, with water. And so we'd fly back and forth. If we had to fly people out of the theater of operation, we'd do it. We'd fly to the ship, fly back, get parts. So we only were told to do different things. And when we found out what was going on, we as a unit, obviously we read the paper. We knew that there was a dictator that was trying to take over a country, bully a country. And we were in there to support the ground units, and their mission was to get him out.
What were your first thoughts when you actually arrived in Saudi Arabia? Like what?
When I arrived in Saudi Arabia, our units, we got off a big C-5, a big giant transport airplane that we had to, prior to deploying, we had to dismantle all of our helicopters, take them completely apart, and then feed them into this giant cargo airplane, 2 per airplane. So we had 5 airplanes, 5 C-5s taking, each 2 of our airplanes. And so with each airplane, we have all our guys are all in the different units in the airplanes. So when my airplane finally landed, it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Saudi time, and I got all my stuff, and I'm walking over because now our job is to put the airplanes back together again. So now that we can perform our mission. Well, I'm walking over to take all my stuff and put it down and get water and to find out where we're going to put the airplanes together, and I see an A-10. It's a Warthog. It's a observer airplane, and I see this airplane landing on fire, missing half a blade, and it's smoking and streaming everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, this is it. We're in it. So it was exciting, but yet it was like, oh my God, frightening as well, because you don't know what goes on, behind, and the enemy is doing, not only the enemy, but also our sister forces that were trying to do the same thing we were doing. So a little scary, but exciting at best too.
How long were you stationed where you were there throughout the conflict?
We arrived there in late September, early October, and we were there until after everything was done. We were the last unit pulled out. We came back to the States. It was near Father's Day in June. We started calling ourselves the Lost Boys because they forgot about us. So we were there for the whole thing. We also, because we were still in the country, we also helped Turkey and the Bedouins that were in the country trying to get aid. It was provide comfort, which was one of the last operations in Iraq for all the guys that were, all the refugees and everything, flying into or going into Turkey.
But how far away were you actually from the Kuwaiti-Iraq border when you were stationed there?
It's hard to mention or describe, because you've got Iraq, you've got Kuwait, and you've got Saudi Arabia, and it's like a triangle where they all meet. And we were like in this little triangle here, the spearhead, where Saudi's like this, and between us, I don't know this, on the borders of Kuwait and Iraq and Saudi, on the line, for roughly 200 yards, 100 yards in their country, 100 yards in the Saudi, they had laid minefields. And then our infantry guys had gone ahead and marked off where all those minefields were for us, for safety, with barbed wire, concertina wire. So that way we knew where to patrol up to without walking into the mines and, and getting hurt. So we were, I would say, the corner of the house here. That's how far we were to the barbed wire and concertina wire. And so, we actually had defectors, Iraqi defectors, crawling through, coming to us to surrender themselves to us through the minefields. So we always had to patrol to make sure that, even though they're minefields, but you still had, people coming through that didn't care about being blown up. They just wanted to leave their country and be safe.
What was your daily life like while you were stationed in Saudi Arabia?
Up until the ground war, it was 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. We took half the guys would work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Then half of them will work from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So somebody's always up. Someone's always, guarding the post. And our daily operations were to do aerial reconnaissance, transport troops, transport supplies back and forth from the ship, just to let them know that we're still here, and practice. Like loading and unloading, lifting and de-embarking parts and supplies. And then, once the ground war started, I was a machine gunner, because all hands that are available. And we actually flew in the mission. We landed in the Kuwait City International, where there were just 8 of us out there in the middle of nowhere. So we had to set up shop, set up a camp, set up security, and wait for our reinforcements to come in so we could start from there and then push the Iraqi infantry back towards our country. So once that was on, it was every waking moment, that you could. You grab sleep here, grab sleep there, but everybody was, had to pull their own weight. So different.
How much of an adjustment was it for you to get used to the climate and the overall atmosphere in Saudi Arabia in being in conflict?
It wasn't that big of an adjustment, because obviously the Marines, we're always running, we're always working out, we're always, we trained, like I told you, we go into the desert and we train for months. We go into the jungles, we train for months. And so we're prepared. Prior to going to any deployment, you always have that type of training. But the biggest, I think I told you before, the biggest problem we had was all the sand. I mean, it's like being at the beach 24/7. You get sand in your hair, sand in your crotch, sand in your pockets, sand in your food. It was just crazy. You're breathing it. That's just. And obviously they had other things like all the flies and all the different. We had kangaroo rats at night that come out of the desert and rummage through our stuff, and so there were little stuff that wasn't deterrent to us. We just accepted it, and then we cover my face and get the sand goggles to cover your eyes. You have eye wash for your eyes every morning. So we dealt with what we were, dealt. We dealt with it, but then we were hoping that it wouldn't last long. So we were prepared for as best we were. That's our military.
So what ways exactly did your training actually prepare you both mentally and physically in being in Saudi Arabia?
Nothing can prepare you, for the ultimate sacrifice. You just hope that you're trained well and you just accomplish your mission. And if anything does happen to you, you always hope that your buddy, your teammate, your peer is there to pick up the slack and help you out.
So, what was your personal role and your fellow Marines' role in the combat while stationed there?
While we were in Southwest Asia, my role was to actually to support anybody that flew in the airplane, whether it was a air crew or a prisoner of war. Had to make sure that there was food in the airplane, had to make sure that we had water in the airplane, had to make sure we as air crew had body protective armor and any other type of protective equipment we needed to have, and make sure it was safe.
And can you describe the first combat that you saw when you were stationed there?
Well, the first combat experience I told you, what I saw was that the aircraft flying in on fire and missing a blade or a wing. But then the actual combat, once we started the combat missions, one particular mission was, you picture this big airplane coming in, and the front of our airplanes had this big, it's called a refueling probe, and it would stick out beyond the wing. So for the Iraqis, they thought that this was a flying artillery gun coming at them. And we came over the bars, they just throw their hands up in the air like, we surrender, surrender. And we'd land and we'd throw them on and bring them back so they could be interrogated by our intelligence team. But that's about the only combat that we actually saw, without obviously the fact that we're being shot at the airport.
What was one of the most interesting events or your favorite story to tell of being stationed in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East?
Well, the media, they have their own visions, and they televise all of the news that's going on. But the people back home, they don't realize what we're doing over there, but they don't know everything about what we're doing. And so after the actual ground war, when we went into Kuwait and saw all of the captured equipment, there was a camp we had set up there, and I remember there was a little Kuwaiti boy that came up to us, and he was trying to thank us for liberating his country, and they all wanted something, we didn't have anything, and the only thing I had was a bullet that I had, and I gave them the bullet, and he took it and he held it, and like, this is what saved his country. This one made him free, and his mom thanked me, and that's one of the warm stories that I like telling about the military.
What were your thoughts about the conflict while you were still stationed there? Like your political thoughts about it?
Well, the military service members don't really have a say on. I mean, we have our own opinions. The Democrats and Republicans and Independents and all that, but when it comes down to actually, Congress and people making orders, and we're giving a mission, and we do it. Whether it's right or wrong, in our view, has no impact, but we still have to do the mission. So, we knew that we were going in to get rid of a person or people that were trying to control another smaller country that had no military, had no defense. So that's what we went in to do.
And while the combat was still going on, still raging, how did you think that the whole conflict would end?
I hoped it would end, peaceful. But as we know, that wasn't in their language, and they just kept fighting back and fighting back. But as far as the length, obviously with our sister forces and everybody that pulled together, we were able to make it as short a conflict as possible. So I hope that answered your question.
Yep. And while you were stationed there, did you get to talk to any of the locals while the conflict was still going on and see their thoughts about it?
Not while the conflict was going on. After the conflict, like I told you, with that little boy and his mom, I had a Kuwaiti major come up and shake our hands, and I actually got a picture of him with me and his entourage. But they were very thankful of what we did for their country. So,
how did your fellow Marines view the conflict? Like you just said, how you viewed it. How did your fellow Marines view the conflict as a whole?
We all had our own opinions, about what was going on. But like I said again, the military is given a mission by the President of the United States, and as long as you carry out that mission, everything is well. But everybody concerned was always worried about, wrapping things up and actually coming home all in one piece. So we did that.
And when the Iraqi army was retreating and they set the oil fires in Kuwait, what were your exact thoughts about that?
We were mad, obviously, because of the waste of oil and we flew up and we tried to fly into it. You couldn't. It was so thick. It was in your hair. Oil, the sand. Was also we had sandstorms at the same time, so that grounded us for a day or two. But it was just we at the time were thinking, what kind of idiots do this to their own oil that they're trying to save and trying to control, and then obviously it took months for us to go back in there and cab the oil, save whatever we could, and put the fires out. So we thought it was idiotic. But
what was the closest distance you got to the oil fires when they were set? Like how far away? Like were you close up or did you see them from a distance?
We were on top of them. When we flew in, though, obviously we're trying to follow our infantry ground units in. But yeah, I think that I got a couple pictures. They were like right there, beyond the minefields. They were all there, and we got everything was all our equipment, our airplanes, everything full of oil and soot and sand. It was nasty.
So how did it exactly more in depth affect the operations of everyone there, including the locals, including you and your fellow Marines?
It slowed everything down. Slowed the television crew, everybody. You get a picture of all these fires for miles, trying to get in there, and because you're fighting the winds and the sand and the oil, you're falling on you, and it stuff's on fire. It just slowed everything down. It's the rescue efforts, the liberating of the country, everything, because it was more concerned about the oil than we were about letting them flee back into the country.
When the fighting finally ended, what were your first thoughts and your fellow companions' thoughts about it finally being over?
When can we go home and have our hamburgers? It's how soon can we go home? But obviously we can't go home until everything is done. And our unit was the last unit there. We didn't come home until almost Father's Day in June, and the ground war was in February. So we also participated while we were there. We participated in feeding the Bedouins going into Turkey because we were the only transportation over there at the time. So we just couldn't wait to get back home.
And from the time the conflict ended to the time you arrived back home, what exactly did you do while you were still stationed there in Saudi Arabia?
Support.
Just support?
Yeah, because you still have ships out in sea. You still have personnel coming in to babysit, and the people that were there are leaving. So we were still the security and the transportation for all of the remaining contingencies. Not just the Marine Corps was there, the Navy and the Air Force and the Army.
Years later, once you were back in America and settled down, what were your thoughts about the conflict as a whole, looking back at it?
My personal thoughts?
Yeah.
Why didn't we go in and take over Iraq and oust Saddam Hussein? That was, had we done it then, we wouldn't have had to worry about it again. But back again, we were there to liberate a country, free them of the tyranny they were going under, and that's all we were doing. We weren't going in there to take over and dismantle Iraq. We were there to help Kuwait.
And do you believe that President Bush handled the situation well there, or could he have done it better?
I think he handled it well for what he promised, the country, and obviously try to keep all our political relations with Saudi Arabia, with Iran, and with all the other uh, Southwest Asian countries. So I think he did very well.
And when you first heard about Saddam Hussein being captured years later, what are your thoughts? Did it take you back to when you were stationed there? Explain.
When he was captured, it's like, hey, we should have done that 10 years ago. But I was glad that they finally did it, and I thought that Iraq would now be a much better country without him, without a tyrant like that. So I was happy.
And when you heard about him being captured, did you think about the future of Iraq and what type of government it would be and such?
No, I just thought that obviously that country would need some sort of help, whether it was, with manpower and rebuilding, because obviously they went through a lot, but I knew that now they had this guy out of the country and they could continue and try to rebuild and establish a better government than they had before.
And do you think the U.S. should have intervened in Kuwait's invasion and occupation, or do you think they should have let it to another country, let them deal with it themselves?
Well, we are one of the stronger countries in the world, so if they sat back and let other countries try to do it, who knows how long it would have lasted, We went in there, we started, August of 90, started, demanding that he leave, and we started setting up positions in Saudi Arabia and other countries and out at sea, and then it was over by March 1st, but we were cleaning up and, all the residual stuff, but, had another country gone in, we didn't know how long it would last, or how far Saddam could have gone.
And what are your political beliefs on American intervention in the Middle East and other poor countries today?
My personal political beliefs?
Yes.
I don't believe we should be over there, but because we are over there, we shouldn't be restricted of what we can and cannot do. State a purpose of why we're there, do that mission, and then leave. As far as supporting them and protecting them and giving them all our fuel, all our equipment, I personally don't believe that, because we have people here, we could put our resources to use better in the United States than in the third world country.
And final question, do you think there will be a similar situation that happened in Iraq, like with a dictator trying to invade a smaller country, and do you think we're going to respond the same way, if so?
It all depends. It's all up to Congress. Do I think there's somebody out there that's like Adolf Hitler or Saddam or Ayatollah? Yeah, there's probably somebody out there that eventually will think and get into power. But hopefully with our communications and with our patrols, and I think that we can try to let them know that if something like that does happen, the U.S. is ready and able to go in and take care of it and squash it before it even gets started. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.